Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. We're here to talk Seahawks football and kind of recap the first week of free agency. Lots of activity going on, some trades, some player acquisitions, some re-signings, all of that to cover and kind of figure out where we stand in the roster building process in the offseason. I think we look in pretty good shape overall. I really like the way that we've approached this. We didn't pounce on, the idea that we needed to get interior offensive line help at any cost. We did have some parameters. They did go after Will Fries. They weren't able to get him, and I'm kind of glad that they passed on him. It's one of those guys that's kind of a 1-year production guy. Injury last year, breaking the tibia. Goes out and gets a 5-year contract, which Seattle just doesn't do. In fact, the entire league doesn't give 5-year contracts unless there's some hidden things in there that make those last couple years void years or whatever. But lots to talk about. Let's get started. How you doing, Keith?
Doing good. Yeah, there is a lot to talk about. Seahawks have now found replacement players for the two big names they lost, on top of signing a bunch of their own guys back, upgrading the defense and the defensive depth significantly. All we've got left is the biggest problem that we came into the offseason with, and that's the offensive line.
Yeah, well, and we can talk about that in just a little bit. Let's kind of go through what we did. About all the letting go of Geno Smith and DK. We don't have to cover that stuff. Sam Darnold comes in, and the nice thing about that, if you really take a look at the swap per se, we kind of swapped out Geno for Sam Darnold. DK's gone. We now have Cooper Kupp, who just signed, and Valdez Scantling to come in and kind of replace those. Plus, we got a second and a third round pick. And salary cap relief. I like that approach. I mean, that's a ballsy move by John Schneider, moving off of Geno Smith in particular, because they were never going to get together on the numbers that they were talking about unless they went through some prolonged discussion, which they just didn't want to do. They moved quickly and reacted to the market. Knew Sam Darnold was going to be out there and pounced on that and successfully got him onto the club. I thought that was excellent. I think Sam Darnold is actually a really good fit in this system, and I think it's a lateral move with a player that's 7 years younger,
and a player that's came into the league with the Jets and really struggled. But it's the freaking Jets. They're such an awful organization with poor talent. And basically, he took the Geno Smith route. He left there, backed up, was a backup for a year or two, and then got his chance to start and looked good. It's notable that, when he went to San Francisco to be their backup, Shanahan loved him and would like to have kept him, but knew that he was a starter. And so to me, that says a lot, because it's Shanahan, and he knows quarterbacks, he knows offenses. Like that's what he does. And so,
and Clint Kubiak was there as his quarterback coach.
True. And it says a lot that they went and got him. As soon as they needed a quarterback, they were like, hey, this guy's available. And we know that he can run Clint's his offense. So that's good. My one concern with all of it is that if you look at the stats and kind of the more advanced stuff, is that Geno Smith was better under pressure than Sam Darnold by a wide margin. Now, Sam Darnold was better without pressure than Geno by a wide margin. And so it ends up being a lateral swap, but you trade out better play when there's not pressure for worse play when there is pressure. And you do so on a team with an offensive line that's absolute like disaster.
I would argue
So
that there's a little bit of upside there and under the pressure too. If you take a look at a couple of the advanced stats that kind of peek into that, he was second in the NFL in touchdown passes under pressure with 13, first in completions of over 20 yards under pressure with 35, and first in big time throws versus the blitz with 16.
yeah, but if you so
And if you
that
go
means
watch the
okay, if he's
film,
throwing
he moves
deep,
around really well in the pocket too. I'm just saying, he moves around like Geno. You know, Geno had that subtlety about him where he could kind of sidestep, move, subtle little movements. And Darnold does that really well. In fact, I would argue even better than Geno.
yeah, but if you go through and you look at the other stats, the like what is his QBR under pressure? It's not good. It's well under Geno's. What is his
He was
passer
14th
rating?
in the NFL in QBR though. So
Oh,
I mean,
overall, yes,
yes,
but
yes,
not under pressure. He's really, really good when the offensive line gives him a pocket, but he struggles more than Geno. Everybody struggles under pressure. So it's a
right.
matter of how big
Well,
is the drop off between where you are when there's a clean pocket versus where you are when there's not. His drop off is pretty large. Geno's was significantly smaller, but Geno wasn't as good when there was a clean pocket. So I'm just saying it's
yeah.
a very lateral move, but it's a lateral move to a kind of a different type of player that doesn't necessarily fit Seattle's offensive line roster. Um,
Well, I'm gonna counter you just a little bit and say, okay, let's drill down to scheme specific stuff here. I think that this scheme is designed to help quarterbacks. You've
it
taken
is.
pressure off pre-snap reads and so forth, handed those over
Yep.
to the center. You've got a quick game now. You've got slants and what was I going to say? Like bubble screens, all that kind of stuff that kind of come into play. Use of tight ends more in 12 personnel. I think that the whole offense is designed to get the ball out quickly, a little bit more quickly than Geno did, or that offense was designed to do. And I think that it's going to be okay. I mean, I don't and I think the improvements, and I really want to kind of get into this, and maybe this is the show, or maybe another show where we talk about the offensive line, because you take a look at the coaching staff that they brought in and the dedication to the improvement with our current players, as far as teaching them, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I really have a lot of confidence in Dennison and some of the other coaches there to improve what we currently have as well. And then we're going to go out and get a draftable, maybe a starter level player in the draft. And then potentially, we can talk about this too. Tevin Jenkins coming in to visit on Monday. I think he's overrated. We kind of talked and chatted a little bit about him when it first happened, but I kind of dug into it a little bit, and I'm pretty good with it, except for the injury history. Like he's missed a few games, but not a ton. I mean, he's averaged like 14 games a season over the last 3 years, which is where he primarily became a starter. And he's got a lot of upside there, and I think he fits the scheme better. And as far as the outside zone blocking, very athletic guy, can get out there in space. So I'm just really interested in how you feel overall, not yet addressing the biggest off-season need in free agency, passing on the players we did pass on and not going after other players that maybe we should have, and then now settling maybe on a guy like Tevin Jenkins to come in and depending on the draft to kind of fill those holes. And what you think about our current players, the upside that we still have on the roster.
Well, there's a lot of upside in the guys that are on the roster, but it's upside. But what we've seen on the field has not been anything, they're still much closer to their floor than their ceiling. And that's been the problem. And so like there was no development of any of the guys like Bradford, or Haynes last year, and that's why they're kind of in the spot that they're in. You've got essentially right now, you've got an interior offensive line of Haynes, Oluwatimi, and probably Lumea, maybe Bradford. I don't know. Take your pick. None of those players, although none of those four players that I just named played well. They were all significantly below average players. And so, yes, there's upside. Haynes has a ton of upside. He just never developed at all, as a rookie. Never really got much of a chance but he kept getting beat out by other players, including Lumea, who also has some upside because he was changing positions and was thought of as a developmental guy, and yet after 10 games, he was out there as a starter. Oluwatimi, on the other hand, has had 2 years in the league and has failed to win a starting job, both of them. Managed to get on the field a little bit last year and looked okay at times, but not at others. Honestly, this is a position group that needs an overhaul. Pick 2 of the 4 and keep them. Replace the other 2. Add at least one starter from outside the group. You can't go into the season with those 4 guys as the interior offensive line. You've seen that. Why are you running that back? That's ugly. That's bad. Like,
I agree with you.
Go get some talent.
Yeah, I agree with you in general. That's why I kind of like the Tevin Jenkins thing. I think it's going to be a 1-year prove-it deal, and fairly inexpensive. And what I mean by that is under $10 million probably, or 8, 10, somewhere in there. And give him the keys over there on the left guard spot or the right guard. He's played both. He's primarily been a left guard the last couple of seasons. And then go find somebody in the draft as well that you really like. I want to reemphasize this again, though, that, we're talking about a new scheme, new coaching staff that has years. Like, if you go down the coaching staff that we have, there's 3 or 4 guys that have coached offensive lines in the NFL before, not just one. And then you add the play calling there that is designed to help your offensive line be better, with play action, and under center stuff and so forth. So I think just organically, if we brought back the same, like Tomlinson came back, we brought back the same guys, I think organically, just by changing the scheme and the coaching and all that stuff, we could go from 28th to 20th, as far as just overall performance. I think that's inherently just built into the coaching staff and the scheme to help and assist in that area. But I totally agree with you that we attack this position group, and don't wait for that development necessarily. Those guys will still be on the roster because they're inexpensive. They still will go through that development no matter what you do, as far as bringing in Jenkins or going out and get a guy in the first or second round in the draft that could potentially start right away. And I'm not worried about it. Like, there's a ton of angst out there, and that's a nice way to call it, in social media about Seattle's inability to address this situation. And I would argue this is March, man. We are literally 6 months away from the first snap in a real game, and there are lots of ways to acquire talent and build a roster, and they will go through that entire process, and we will put forth a competent and better offensive line than we had in 2024. I just guarantee it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. All of that. I would just say that it's hard to see the team go make all these wholesale changes at other positions, spend money here, and trade for a player there, and all of that, and leave your biggest need just sitting there with nothing changed.
Yeah. I will say that they did go after Wolf Rice. I mean, they did. They offered him a 3-year deal, and it was similar money to what he ended up in Minnesota. Minnesota just added 2 more years to the deal and got it up to 80 some odd million dollars. And Seattle just wasn't willing to do that. That was him breaking a leg last year, and then not being able to bring him in for a physical because it was an early signing situation. They couldn't do that until Wednesday or Thursday of this last week, and they lost out on the deal. I don't blame them for that. That's, to me, is like, you swung, you missed, and I wouldn't have wanted you to hit that ball, because that would have been a very regrettable, potentially regrettable signing. While he's a scheme fit, again, he's really, nobody heard of Will Fries a month ago. Like, he's not a world beater out there. He was just one of the best available in free agency, which doesn't bode well for who's available in free agency, because you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not sure if that would have helped the line or not.
That helps. I mean, that applies to Tevin Jenkins, though, is he's the best currently available option in free agency.
Yes.
But
I'll tell
guys
you why
that were
I like
better
him.
guys that were better options in free agency have signed, leaving him as the best current option, and those guys weren't great options. So
yeah, I think the rub on Tevin Jenkins is the injury history and just staying healthy. Because if you take a look at him, he's the last 3 years he's been a starter on Chicago's offensive line. Started 38 out of a possible 45 games. He had 1 penalty allowed in 2024, 3 in 2023. He had a Pro Football Focus grade in 2024 overall of 75.4. He was the 18th best guard in the NFL, allowed 4 sacks, 17 pressure. Those were career highs on a very bad offensive line overall. For example, Tomlinson last year had 6 sacks and 38 pressures. So this guy was, almost twice as good as that. In 2023, he had an overall grade of 72.6 on the same amount of snaps, 730 snaps. And then in 2023, he was also one of 14 guards not to give up a sack, 5th among guards in pressure allowed with 6, tied for 8th with quarterback hits allowed 1, 8th in pass blocking grade, 6th in run blocking grade, 4th in overall blocking. And I just think that he's got way more upside than he's been given credit for. And I think if he stays healthy, I think he would be a guy that you could really plug and play for, to be your starter at left guard. And definitely at a minimum a draft edge, but at a maximum he's your starter level player that's going to give you 14 to 16 games. You're going to have to probably play a couple other guys a little bit to supplement that, but that's okay, because we've got guys on the roster that you kind of want to work in anyway and develop.
Yeah, we've got guys you want to develop. So yeah, I mean, to me it comes down to money. It also comes down to them announcing, or it being announced that he's coming in on Monday, Friday morning.
Right.
Screams of he's currently, being pursued by the Bengals, and his agent is like, hey, look, offer him more money. And it has me concerned that he won't ever make it here. And so that again would be a problem. I get what you're rambling off these numbers that sound really freaking good, but they're from Pro Football Focus, and I take anything they say about offensive linemen with a really big grain of salt. And yeah, I mean,
I do too.
He is widely considered a draft bust. He was taken
at tackle.
He was taken 39th overall, and has never lived up to that draft status. And yes, part of that's because he's been a guard for the last couple of years. But he's widely
most of that, Keith,
bust.
I think, not that, but I think most of that rep comes from just being on Chicago's line. He was their best offensive lineman. And they moved off all those guys this season. They threw a bunch of money out. Thuney is the guy that is replacing him. So I mean, one of the better guards in the league. So I don't know. It is what it is. It's just it's a patch, and it's a potential upside. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't, hopefully it doesn't cost you a lot of money, and you've got players under him that can develop and move into that spot, or you draft a guy. Some of the other stuff that they did, I really want to talk about DeMarcus Lawrence, Keith. This is
Yeah.
kind of a free agency pickup that I was not expecting. I didn't think that they were going to spend a lot of money on the defensive line, but when they did get rid of Jones, and Uchenna Nwasu is unknown right now as far as what he's going to do on the adjustment on the cap that they've been working on. A guy like that made a lot of sense and really kind of fixed their need during the upcoming draft. Now they don't have to kind of push and reach for a player. What do you think about that? 3 years, $32 million. Do not have the breakdown as far as first year salary, cap hit, and guarantees and so forth.
It's hard to truly evaluate a contract when you don't have the breakdown of all the stuff. But DeMarcus Lawrence is a guy that at his best is one of the best in the entire NFL. But he's dealt with a lot of injuries. His production has dropped. He just hasn't
32 years old.
Yeah. So you got to look at him and you're like, okay, what are they expecting from him? How are they going to use him? He's a very good, he's a very good, run, like edge setter on top of being a great pass rusher. He's just an all around, good player. He's going to be outside linebacker
and
here.
good in the locker room.
Yep. A guy that I know Pete Carroll freaking loved in the draft process, wanted to go out and get him when he became a free agent a few years ago, but he re-signed with Dallas. And now John Snyder's going out and getting him to come in and be an upgrade over Dre Jones, which honestly, it won't be that hard. But this feels to me a little bit like when Buffalo went and got Von Miller a few years ago. Was it a need? No. Did it feel like they overpaid for what they were going to get from him? Yeah. But he came in, he offered a lot of stability, a lot of vet leadership, a lot of just, know-how to a room that was full of talent and helped get more out of the other guys. And that Von Miller thing just ended like this year. Like this offseason, he's finally not under contract with the Bills, and so that it ended up working out. Even though the contract, you look at production versus, versus salary, it seems a little skewed, but it worked out in that they were paying for more than just sacks, right? And Lawrence is a guy that gives you a lot more than just sacks, and so I have a hard time hating this. I know people are like, oh, he's so old. Like, why did you do this? That's a lot of money for a guy like that, whatever. You know what? I just don't, I just can't get behind, hating this deal. I like it.
It's a $10 million a year deal. The first year cap hit's probably going to be closer to 7 or something like that. I don't hate it. And for all the reasons that you said, absolutely, you're spot on. I think it comes in, kind of stabilizes the edge position and defensive end positions for the team, and I think it'll be great. It's the kind of player that Mike Macdonald would love to have and be able to have on his defense, and I like that. How about did we talk about the Scantling pickup on our last
Not
show?
really.
Or did that happen yet?
It
that's
had
a 1 year,
happened, and we
$4
kind of
million
just mentioned
deal.
that he's kind of the they went and got themselves a wide receiver 3 to fill the gap left by Tyler Lockett leaving, and that's who he is. He is a guy that has more upside than his last year's stats, and especially when he is playing in this system where he had his best years. But he's not a guy that's going to go out and dominate a game. He's just a decent player. But that's what Tyler Lockett was last year and the year before and the year before that, as he's, aged and no longer the dominant player that he once was. He's a good wide receiver 3, someone you can count on, someone that plays well in the slot, someone with good short area quickness. He's got some downfield speed.
And that's the way that they're going to use him, Keith. If you looked at the way that they used him in New Orleans, he was kind of the post and go guy. And he led the NFL for a certain time with yards per catch at over 20. And they already got a couple of really good underneath guys, and we'll talk about the next one here in a second. But I like him. He's on the roster. I see them still drafting a guy potentially high in the first 3 rounds. And so our wide receiver room is actually going to be decent enough. Yeah, it's not going to have DK Metcalf. It's not going to have Tyler Lockett. You've still got in Jigba, you've got Scantling, and now you've got Cooper Kupp. Plus, you're going to draft a guy. You've still got Bobo. They just signed Cody White again to a 1-year deal to come back and compete. So it's not an empty room. It's just a reconfigured room. They're reallocating some resources around the roster a little bit, but I still think it's going to be a wide receiver room that's going to be able to allow our offense to call every play, for Darnold to have weapons to be able to get the ball out and all that kind of stuff. So how about Cooper Kupp? Just signed him yesterday afternoon. We kind of thought it might happen because of that Northwest connection, and they just went out and made it happen, even though there was a little bit of competition out there. I think it was always going to be Seattle, though.
It felt like it was going to be Seattle. When he left LA, because they cut him, they had to, save on the cap. They're kind of in a rebuilding situation down there.
It's kind of like a Tyler Lockett deal.
Yeah. Like, where was he going to go? Well, Dallas really wanted him, but there were a couple other teams that wanted him. Like New England wanted him, but only at a very discounted rate. And he was willing to take less to come to Seattle because he's from the Pacific Northwest. This is coming home for him. And I just look at him and his career and everything. It's like, you go back to 2021, and this was a triple crown winner. He led the league in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, right? But that was in 2021. And then in 2022, he got hurt, only played 9 games. He only played 12 in the last 2. Or the last 2 years, both each he had 12 games played. His numbers are down. He's older.
And that's you extrapolate those numbers though, dude. Like, even if the numbers are down, like he only had 12 games or whatever, but he still had 700 some odd yards of production and 5 touchdowns. I think he is going to be what he is. I think he's a great number 2 on this roster. The question is, how does Clint Kubiak use 2 slot receivers in the same offense, and 12 personnel and all that kind of stuff, that they very rarely, 33% of the time, have 3 wide receivers on the field. So it's interesting to me. I mean,
they've got 3 slot receivers, actually.
Essentially, but I think they're going to play.
Scantling is also a slot receiver.
Yeah, but he's got some height and length. I think they're going to play him outside. They definitely need an outside type. So when you talk about the draft, the slot receiver position is not going to be something I think they're going to be looking at the draft. You're going to look for a type now, an X wide receiver, a guy that's on the outside, that's got a little bit of length, and that can high point the ball, get down the field, and stretch a defense. I think that's the type of wide receiver now they're looking at in the draft.
I would agree too. They need a deep threat. They need someone to create space for guys like Njigba and Kupp to work underneath.
That's why a guy like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State is a guy now that I think would be on their radar for that 2nd round pick. A guy that's 6'4", 220 pounds, that runs a 4.43 40, not quite as fast as DK, but still nonetheless very good, productive wide receiver, had a great combine. Somebody like that, I think, is more in line with what they're looking for.
Yeah. But yeah, especially because Valdez-Scantling, he had some speed at age 23. He's now 31. He doesn't, the idea that he's this elite deep threat, I think, is past. But he's also on a 1-year deal. They need a guy that they can bring in, that can take a top off a defense, and keep the safeties back. And if you do that, you're going to be fine. Kupp's not that guy. He's never been that guy. He's a guy that's going to get you a ton of receptions, a ton of first downs, underneath and medium routes, that kind of stuff. Because he's he's so big, and for his size, his short area quickness is good. He gets separation, uses his body, fantastic hands.
Yes,
Is a guy that can
all of
do
that,
everything.
and blocks really well.
And yeah. And so yeah, you kind of look at that, and that's his that's kind of his go-to. And and Jigba's a guy that's going to give you more stats. I think he's quicker, he's faster, but he doesn't have that deep threat speed. And I think it would be wrong to use him that way. That's not his skill set. So they need someone that can create space for everyone else. Someone that the team has the speed that teams have to um, be careful about. Because if they do just leave him over there by himself, Darnold's going to go over the top and throw some touchdowns. And
Yeah,
that's who they're looking for. But they don't need a guy that's going to come in and give them 60 receptions this year.
right.
And so
Yeah, a guy
they
like
need a guy
Matthew
that's
Golden, it wouldn't shock me in the first round. I mean, he's got some speed, some a little bit of height. He's 5'11", 191, but he's going to get down. He's around a 4.29 in the 40. That's a guy that's going to be out there. A guy like Trey Harris from Ole Miss, 205 pounds, 6'2", run a 5'4", 40, but still has that body of a number one wide receiver.
Yeah, but at 4.5, that's not a guy who's going to stretch the field.
Right.
And so I really think that you're looking for a guy who's like 6'2" and runs like a 4.38 or faster. And if you find one of those, just pencil him in. That's going to be Seattle's pick. At wherever you have to pick him in order to make it happen. And then, yeah, they're just going to plug him into that spot. He's going to line up on the outside, and he's going to run a lot of go routes, and they'll develop the rest of his route tree and stuff along the way. But right now, you've got JSN and Cup, and you need to create some space for them to work. You've got to keep that free safety back. So go find a guy.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So, they also re-signed Ernest Jones, Jerron Reed coming back, Josh Jobe, Josh Ross. They just re-signed Cody White to kind of a new deal. I really like what they've done this offseason. They started out after the trades with $60 million in cap. They've got the room. If you go look at over the cap, there's a couple other contracts that they can make adjustments to get even more space if needed. They've got all the room that they need. They're almost in free agency. There'll be a little of this, little of that beyond the Tevin Jenkins signing if that happens. Let's talk about what happened to our draft. So we started out with the 18th pick and the 50th and the 82nd, and then a 4th rounder, a 5th rounder, 6th, 7th, and so forth. It was fairly mundane, boring draft, 7 picks overall. And we were going to have to kind of move around a little bit in the draft to generate more draft capital and so forth. With these trades, now we've got 2 second-round picks, 50 and 52. We've got 2 third-round picks now, 82, 92. We've got those comp picks that got locked in now. One of those that was projected to be a 6th round is now a 5th round, so that was amazing. And 5 picks in the top 92. What does that do to our ability to infuse the roster with talent?
Well, I mean, that's the draft capital without moving down, and in order to get more picks, to find 5 year one starters. And I mean that's a great infusion of talent. I mean, those guys that are in the top 100 you're looking at guys that are going to be starters, and it's just you and I like to project them moving down, and John Snyder likes to move down because it gives you an extra player or two in order to go through and add more talent or more bodies that are cheap also because they're on rookie contracts. You don't have to move down. You've already got the picks that you would normally do that to acquire. Now you can just stick and pick the best player available. You have the
Yeah.
if a guy that you really like starts to fall a little bit, let's say Shedeur Sanders is sitting there at 12, and you go, you know what? Let's move up and get our quarterback of the future. You have the ammunition to do that, and not have to sacrifice your entire draft to do it. Like, it's hard to have a bad draft when you walk into it with that many good draft picks.
Yeah. Well, Seattle just became the team with the most draft capital heading into the draft, which is amazing. And I would say, we did get Darnold. He's going to be at least a 2-year quarterback in this city, but with 5 picks in the top 100, you've got kind of a middle class this year of quarterbacks available. Quinn Ewers, all those kind of guys, right? You've got an opportunity now to take one of those 5 picks and use it at the quarterback position and not really impact the way that you're still building the rest of the roster out. Like, it's hard to take a quarterback sometimes because he's not going to start right away. He's not going to impact your roster necessarily. It's kind of the future thing. But they've got the room to do that now, and it would shock me if we didn't come out of this draft with one of those mid-tier quarterbacks in the second or third round.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this is you want to take a guy that you think has high upside that you can develop. Kirk Cousins was a 4th round pick, and I think he's a guy that was viewed. He had a lot of things that you would like as a quarterback, but there were some things that he didn't do well, but you think you can fix him, right? Now they got to go find that guy in this draft, and you can take him and not do so at the detriment of the 2025 season, right? You could think about what pissed off Aaron Rodgers so much at Green Bay. Well, it wasn't that they took a quarterback. It's that they took a quarterback in the 2nd round when he didn't have wide receivers, and there were good wide receivers available. If they had taken a quarterback in the 4th or 5th round, he wouldn't have cared. And in that, that kind of thing, if you don't have to use, we've only got 3 picks in the top 100, and one of them has to go receiver and the other one has to go offensive line. Then you have one other pick. If you use that on a quarterback, then you've only got those 2 guys that you had to get, and nothing else. Now with 5, you can infuse talent wherever you need it, and also be like, and we got our quarterback, in round 2, round 3, and we still found all the other pieces that we needed. It just makes that amount of flexibility just there, and it gives you options that you just didn't have.
Yeah. I would say too, there is a chance that they don't take a quarterback, and I get it. I know it'd be frustrating, but there's a pretty good chance, that Sam Darnold has the same season he had with Minnesota. Now, Minnesota had ran a slightly different offense and so on and so forth. They had Justin Jefferson, a few other weapons that Seattle currently does not have. But this system
line that was good
ish. Yeah. He still was under pressure, but yeah. Seattle's offensive line was ranked overall like 28th, and Minnesota's was ranked 6th, just to give you an idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So their offensive line was good.
Yeah. And so I think that, though, if Darnold has the same sort of year statistically and accuracy and touchdown versus interception ratio and so forth, he's going to be our quarterback. Like, there's no real reason to move off of him. He's 27. He'll be 28 this year. So he's still got a number of years. He's under contract fairly inexpensively for that sort of caliber quarterback. And so you could draft a guy. It could be in the 2nd or 3rd round, and he may end up being an asset for you eventually to flip into, another to picks from another team, or you just keep holding on to him. It's kind of unfortunate for a guy that might be ready to start, but at the same time, you've secured your really good backup. I don't know exactly what that does to Sam Howell or how they view him given last year's disaster when he did start. We'll just find out.
Yeah. I mean, they traded for him. I think they gave up too much for him. They had him on the roster for a year and decided that he wasn't the guy. And so, because if they really had belief in him, they wouldn't have given Sam Darnold $30 million a year.
It's true. Yes. Okay, so if we were a bottom dweller in the NFL, I think that equation gets a little different, and he probably does get an opportunity to at least compete with a team that's won 10 games, just missed the playoffs, has aspirations to go higher. They're not rebuilding. Everything that you read out there about rebuilding, retooling, it is retooling the offense. Obviously, we got rid of our starting quarterback, our starting number one wide receiver, and we got rid of our second wide receiver or third wide receiver in Tyler Lockett. A lot of moves. The offensive line is going to be completely rebuilt. You got a new scheme. There's a lot of things working against this offense this season to be really good. I would argue, though, that bringing in Sam Darnold is the best thing you could do to keep the continuity as close as possible to what you had before. And then you just add some really nice key pieces like they have been doing. And I don't know that the offense steps back. I think there's an opportunity still for it to go forward, especially with that draft capital and just the scheme itself being better. So it'll be interesting to me how it all comes together. I love this time of year. It's just fascinating. And then you just add that draft. That draft is going to be so exciting this year with all that draft capital. And I still think that they need a few pieces on the defense, but the offense, we've talked about it over and over. Another wide receiver, a tight end, offensive lineman. I don't know if that's going to be a center or a guard, but the internal development still of the players that we currently have, maybe a quarterback on the defense. You're taking, nose tackle and a backup linebacker and a backup safety, maybe a starter safety if you're going to replace Kobe Bryant. But Kobe's already proved that he can start in the NFL. And on the back end, you're looking for some.
You need a corner. You've got 3 guys on your roster that you trust can play, and all of them will get, major playing time. But if somebody gets hurt, what are you going to do? They need depth at corner, like something fierce. So
the nice thing about the draft, though, is now you can go best player available at almost every level of the draft. Like at pick 18, you kind of felt like you needed to go trenches, either offense or defense with that first pick. You just almost compelled, even though you had players maybe higher on your board out there, like the tight end Warren, or maybe it was another guy, a safety, or maybe it's an offensive tackle that you didn't really need, but he's the best player out there. Now they can just kind of let that board flow and come to them. Maybe it's Jackson Dart rises up at 18. They feel like that he's their guy and they want to take him. It's become very interesting to me. Okay.
Yeah. I think that we did a mock draft show, and I said that tight end at 18 was a luxury pick that they didn't need, and somebody tried to roast me on that in the comments, which I found hilarious. But they're in a position now where you can make that luxury pick. I mean, you really can. If the draft falls in a way where that really good tight end that you're going to be able to plug in to your starting lineup for the next 10 years is sitting there, you no longer have to pass because you have more important positions that need addressing. And yeah, go get them. Like that is something they can do now, which I didn't feel they could do, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Like Emanwari, the safety, the big safety.
Oh God, yeah, I love him.
Right? It's like now he's in the mix. Legitimately, I think before it would have been hard to pass. If a player like Tyler Booker sitting there and he's there as well, it would be hard to not pick the guard.
What if Matthew Golden and Emanwari are sitting there at 18?
And Tyler Warren. I would say Yeah, you
Yeah.
probably take Tyler Warren, because he's such a complete tight end and a guy that's going to be a perennial all pro, maybe pro bowler at that position. And really, you take a look at how Clint Kubiak uses tight ends. We need another tight end. I mean, that now becomes almost a priority in this draft, I would think.
Yeah, the list of priorities has changed. Obviously, the offensive line's still number one, absolutely. And you've got wide receiver has moved up on the list of priorities, and that kind of stuff. But tight end, which was down on the list, quite a bit because other things have been filled in. That moves up, just by the nature of other things moving down, and so it's now sitting there.
And, general managers will tell you that positional need doesn't really matter. It's best player available, and that's how you build in the draft, and blah, 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 blah. That is part of the equation. When they build their roster and they build their 3-year plan and they've got all the spreadsheets laid out and stacking players and so forth, the needs are factored
They're
in
there,
because they weigh their own current roster against the draft, and that's how they do that. It's like, listen, we don't have any left guards on the roster that we really like, and there's 4 of them in the draft that we would rank higher than our current guy. That's how it comes into play. So
yeah, it shows up when they're creating the draft board, right? And so this player was the highest one on the draft board. Well, yeah, but he was at that point on the draft board because of the fact that you gave all of the left guards a boost because you didn't have one.
Right.
So don't completely discount, people drafting for need and that kind of stuff.
So after this show, we're getting back to our draft series where we take a look at prospects, and we are currently on the offensive tackle group on our next show. And then we'll rotate to the other side of the ball, the defense. And so we've got some good shows coming up. We'll obviously stay in touch with anything new in free agency. We'll react to that. But I think for now, the first wave of free agency is clearly over. And now we're in the second and third wave. And Seattle likes to do these little deals now and again. And I'm sure they're not completely done. And it's hard to know exactly where they stand on the cap, because these contracts haven't yet been detailed out, and Over the Cap still has us at $60 million, and they haven't factored in the Darnold contract,
or the Cooper Kupp contract, or the DeMarcus Lawrence contract,
right? And so you need to know kind of where those stand. But if they sign Jenkins as well, they're pretty good. But I think after Jenkins, if that were to happen, I think that they're going to be done for the most part, unless they regenerate a few more things. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, there are still some moves that can be made to
I lost Keith.
Correct.
You there?
I'm here. Are you there?
Okay. Yeah, you froze out a little bit on your video and audio.
So what I was saying is if they needed cap space because they were like, ooh, this other guy became available and we're going to get him, they still have like Noah Fant's contract that they can rework, and things like that in order to generate a little bit more cap space in there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So Nuwasu still got that $21 million cap hit sitting there. And they've got some opportunity to rework that number. They can probably, by reworking it and adding a void year or whatever, they can generate $10 million of cap savings. And even Leonard Williams could be adjusted a little bit if they wanted to. Noah Fant is the obvious one. And that's about it. Yeah, I don't think you really want to touch anything else, but they've still got to extend potentially Charles Cross.
See, that's the other thing
in the offseason and so forth.
You could extend Charles Cross in a way that lowers his 2025 cap number, and just pushes it into 26 through 29. And that's doable.
Where you've got $150 million of cap available in 2026.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. All right.
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, let's get out of here. Good show. Thank you, Keith. We'll come back and we'll talk offensive tackles in the draft on our next show. You can find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast on your favorite podcast platforms and our YouTube channel. And until we see you next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.